The first time I saw Ethan Caldwell's icy blue eyes, they cut through me like a winter storm, sharp and unyielding, as if I were just another cog in his corporate machine. I was nobody, a 24-year-old assistant with a liberal arts degree, drowning in student debt, fetching coffee for a man who ruled Silicon Valley like a king. But in that fleeting glance, something unspoken flickered, and I swore I heard my name, Lucas Bennett, echo in the silence of his gaze. I shook it off, chalking it up to exhaustion. My life was a blur of 80-hour work weeks, surviving on instant ramen and the faint hope of a promotion at Caldwell Enterprises. Ethan was the CEO, a 32-year-old prodigy whose name topped Forbes lists and haunted boardrooms. He was untouchable, 6 feet of tailored suits, chiseled jaw, and a reputation for never smiling. To him, I was just the guy who organized his schedule, drafted his emails, and stayed late to ensure his world ran flawlessly. Or so I thought. It was late September in San Francisco, the city humming with its usual chaos of tech startups and overpriced lattes. I'd been at the company for 6 months, my desk a shrine to Post-it notes and half-empty coffee cups. Ethan's office, a glass fortress on the 42nd floor, overlooked the Bay Bridge, a constant reminder of his untouchable status. That morning, he barked at me for a scheduling mix-up, a rare mistake that left me red-faced and scrambling. "Lucas, do better," he'd said, his voice like frostbite. I nodded, swallowing the sting, and buried myself in work. But that evening, everything changed. I was the last one in the office, the city lights glittering through the windows like a constellation of broken dreams. Ethan emerged from his office, his tie loosened, a shadow of fatigue softening his sharp features. He paused by my desk, his presence commanding the air out of the room. "Lucas," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "why are you still here?" I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Just finishing the quarterly report, sir," I stammered, avoiding his gaze. He didn't move, his silence heavy. Then he did something unthinkable. He sat on the edge of my desk, his long fingers tracing the rim of my coffee mug. "You work too hard," he said, almost to himself. My heart stuttered. Was this the same man who'd once fired an exec for a typo? I dared to look up, and there was again, that flicker in his eyes, like a crack in his icy facade. "I just want to do my job well," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "You do," he said simply, and my chest tightened with something I couldn't name. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of tension and fleeting moments. Ethan started lingering after meetings, asking me about my day, my thoughts, my life outside the office. It was disorienting, his cold professionalism melting into something warmer, more human. One night, he asked me to join him for a late dinner to discuss a client pitch. I expected a sterile boardroom meal, but instead, he took me to a quiet Italian place in North Beach, where candlelight danced across his face as he laughed, actually laughed at my terrible joke about spreadsheets. I started noticing things about him I hadn't before. The way his brow furrowed when he read, the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the way he said my name like it was a secret he was afraid to let slip. But I pushed it down. Ethan Caldwell was straight, married to his work, and I was just his assistant. Falling for him was a one-way ticket to heartbreak. Then came the company gala, a glittering affair at the Fairmont Hotel. I was there to manage logistics, not to mingle, but Ethan insisted I stay by his side. Dressed in a borrowed tux that felt like a costume, I stood awkwardly as he introduced me to investors, his hand brushing my back in a way that sent sparks down my spine. "Lucas is indispensable," he told a board member, his voice carrying a weight that made my pulse race. As the night wore on, the crowd thinned, and Ethan led me to the hotel's rooftop garden. The city sprawled below us, a sea of lights under a velvet sky. He leaned against the railing, his breath visible in the cool air. "Do you ever feel like you're hiding who you are?" he asked suddenly, his voice raw. I swallowed hard, my own secret burning in my chest. I'd known I was gay since I was 15, but I'd never told anyone at work. It was safer that way. Sometimes, I admit it, my voice shaking. But it's easier to keep things professional. He turned to me, his eyes searching mine, and for a moment, the world stopped. "Lucas," he said softly, stepping closer. "What if I don't want professional?" My breath caught as his hand grazed mine, his fingers warm against my skin. The air crackled with possibility, but before I could speak, his phone buzzed, a harsh reminder of the world waiting to pull us apart. The moment shattered like glass. Ethan pulled back, his face tightening as he glanced at his phone. "I have to take this," he muttered, stepping away, leaving me alone with the city's hum and my racing heart. I stood frozen, the ghost of his touch lingering on my hand. What had just happened? Had I imagined the weight in his words, the way his eyes held mine like I was more than just his assistant? The next morning, Ethan was back to his cold, untouchable self, barking orders and barely meeting my gaze. I tried to focus on my work, emails, schedules, client calls, but my mind replayed that rooftop moment on a loop. Was he playing with me? Or was he hiding something, too? I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd glimpsed the real Ethan, the one buried under layers of corporate armor. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between us grew like a storm on the horizon. He'd brush past me in the hallway, his hand lingering a second too long, or call me into his office for no reason, only to sit in silence, his eyes tracing my face. I started keeping a journal, scribbling down every interaction, trying to make sense of the man who was both my boss and my obsession. He said my name again today. I wrote one night, like it was something precious. But then he shut down, like he's afraid of himself. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation that turned my world upside down. I was in the break room, refilling my coffee, when two senior execs started whispering about Ethan. "He's under pressure," one said. "The board's questioning his focus. They think he's distracted." The other smirked. "Distracted? By what?" "His assistant." They laughed, but the words hit me like a punch. Was I the distraction? And why did the idea make my heart race with hope instead of fear? That night, Ethan called me into his office after hours. The city glowed beyond the glass, and he stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the lights. "Lucas," he said, his voice low, "I need you to take on a special project." I nodded, expecting another client report, but he handed me a folder marked confidential. "It's personal," he said, his eyes avoiding mine. "I trust you." The folder contained documents about a nonprofit he was funding, a shelter for LGBTQ youth. My breath caught. Did he know about me? I never told him, but the way he looked at me, like he was searching for something, made me wonder. "Why me?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He hesitated, then said, "Because you're different. You see people, not just numbers." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning I was too scared to unpack. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the project, meeting with shelter staff, coordinating donations, and drafting proposals. Ethan was there every step, his presence both comforting and maddening. One evening, we stayed late at the shelter, painting a rec room with a group of teens. Ethan, sleeves rolled up, laughed as he flicked paint at me, his guard down in a way I'd never seen. A boy named Jamie, barely 16, watched us with knowing eyes. "You two are cute," he said, grinning. I blushed, but Ethan just smiled, a real smile that made my chest ache. Later, as we walked to our cars, Ethan stopped under a streetlight, his face half-shadowed. "Lucas," he said, his voice raw, "do you ever feel like you're living a lie?" My heart pounded. I wanted to tell him everything. How I'd loved men in silence my whole life. How his every glance set me on fire. But fear stopped me. Sometimes I whispered. He stepped closer, his breath warm against my cheek. "I'm tired of hiding," he said, and before I could process it, his lips brushed mine, a fleeting, electric touch that ended too soon. He pulled back, his face a storm of emotions. "I'm sorry," he said, turning away. "I can't." He left me, standing there, the taste of him lingering, my mind reeling. Was he gay? Bi? Or Or was this just a moment of weakness? I drove home in a daze, my journal filling with questions I couldn't answer. The next day, Ethan was gone, out of town for a conference, his office empty. I buried myself in work, but the shelter project kept pulling me back to him. I found a note in the folder, tucked between pages. "Lucas, thank you for seeing me." My heart stopped. It was his handwriting, unmistakable. I clutched the note, my mind racing with possibilities. Was he trying to tell me something? Or was I reading too much into a simple thank you? Ethan's absence was a void I couldn't ignore. For 2 weeks, he was a ghost. Emails only, no calls, no glimpses of his piercing eyes. I clung to that note, rereading it until the paper creased, searching for meaning in every loop of his handwriting. Had he kissed me out of impulse? Or was it a confession? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but word kept me grounded, barely. The shelter project became my lifeline. I spent evenings with the teens, their stories of rejection and resilience mirroring my own buried truths. Jamie, the boy who'd called us cute, became my shadow, asking about Ethan with a sly grin. "He's into you," he said one night, tossing a basketball. I know that look. I laughed it off, but his words fueled a dangerous hope. When Ethan returned, he was different, distant, his walls higher than ever. He avoided me, communicating through curt emails or his VP. I tried to confront him, but he'd slip away, leaving me with nothing but the memory of his lips. My journal filled with frustration. Why did he kiss me if he's just going to shut me out? I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I was still just his assistant, bound by the rules of his world. Then came the board meeting. I was there to take notes, invisible as always, but the tension in the room was suffocating. The board grilled Ethan about declining stock prices, questioning his personal priorities. One exec, a gray-haired man with a sneer, mentioned rumors about Ethan's late-night meetings. My stomach dropped. Were they talking about me? Ethan's face was stone, but his eyes flicked to me for a split second, a silent plea I didn't understand. After the meeting, I cornered him in his office. "What's going on?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "You kissed me, then disappeared. Now the board's on your case. Talk to me, Ethan." He leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he said, his voice low. "This company, my family, they expect me to be someone I'm not." My heart raced. "And who are you, really?" I asked, stepping closer. He stood, closing the distance between us, his breath uneven. "I don't know anymore," he admitted, his voice breaking. "But when I'm with you, Lucas, I feel alive." His hand reached for mine, but the door swung open, a board member, oblivious, with a stack of reports. Ethan stepped back, his mask snapping into place. The next week was a blur of stolen glances and unspoken words. Ethan invited me to a weekend retreat in Big Sur, calling it a team-building trip for the shelter project. I knew it was an excuse, but I went anyway, my heart a tangle of hope and fear. The coastal cliffs were stunning, the air sharp with salt and possibility. We worked side by side, painting murals with the teens, our hands brushing as we passed brushes. At night, we sat by a bonfire, the flames casting shadows across his face. "Tell me about you," he said, his voice soft. I hesitated, then spilled my truth. Growing up in a small Ohio town, hiding my sexuality from my conservative family, moving to San Francisco to find myself. He listened, his eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I've never told anyone this, but I've always known I was different. I just didn't have the courage to face it." My breath caught. "Are you saying?" He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I'm gay, Lucas, but I've spent my life pretending, for my family, my career, my image." He looked away, the weight of his confession heavy in the air. I reached for his hand, my heart pounding. "You don't have to pretend with me," I said. He squeezed my hand, his touch a lifeline in the dark. That night, under a blanket of stars, we kissed again, this time deliberate, desperate, a collision of everything we'd held back. His hands cupped my face, his lips warm and certain. For the first time, I felt seen, not as his assistant, but as Lucas, the man he'd chosen to let in. The kiss in Big Sur changed everything, but it didn't make things easier. Back in San Francisco, Ethan and I were secret, stealing moments in empty offices and late-night car rides. His touch was fire, his whispers a promise, but the weight of his world pressed down on us. He was still the CEO, still the man the board watched like hawks, and I was still just his assistant, caught in a love that felt both inevitable and impossible. We developed a rhythm, coded glances during meetings, brief touches when no one was looking. I lived for those moments, but they came with a cost. Rumors spread like wildfire through the office. Ethan's too close to his assistant. I overheard one day in the elevator. It's unprofessional. My stomach churned, but Ethan brushed it off, his confidence a shield I envied. Let them talk, he said one night, his lips brushing my ear. They don't know us. But the pressure was mounting. The board called an emergency meeting, and I wasn't invited, a first in my 6 months at Caldwell Enterprises. I waited outside, my nerves fraying, until Ethan emerged, his face pale. They're pushing for a vote of no confidence, he said, his voice hollow. They think I'm losing my edge. I wanted to ask if I was the reason, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I squeezed his hand. You're the best CEO they've got, I said. He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. That night, he took me to his penthouse, a sleek fortress of glass and steel overlooking the city. It was the first time I'd seen his private world, and it felt like stepping into his soul. Photos of his family lined the shelves, his parents smiling stiffly, a reminder of the expectations he'd carried his whole life. He poured us wine, his hands shaking slightly. I've never brought anyone here, he said, his voice soft. Not like this. We talked for hours, unraveling years of secrets. He told me about his childhood, the pressure to be perfect, the relationships he'd faked to keep up appearances. I thought I could live like that forever, he said, his eyes locked on mine. Then I met you. My heart swelled, but fear lingered. What happens if they find out? I asked. He pulled me close, his lips brushing my forehead. We'll figure it out, he said. Together. But the world had other plans. The next morning, a tabloid headline screamed, Caldwell CEO's secret romance. Assistant or liability? My blood ran cold. The article was vague, but the implications were clear. Someone had seen us or suspected us. Ethan's phone buzzed with calls from PR, the board, his family. He paced his office, his face a mask of controlled fury. I'll handle it, he said, but I saw the fear in his eyes. I tried to stay strong, but doubt crept in. Was I ruining him? The shelter project kept us grounded, a reminder of why we were fighting. We spent a weekend repainting the rec room, the teens teasing us mercilessly. Jamie cornered me, his eyes serious. Don't let him go, he said. He needs you. I nodded, but the weight of the world felt heavier than ever. Then came the ultimatum. The board summoned Ethan to a private meeting, and he returned looking like he'd been gutted. They wanted to step down, he said, his voice barely audible, or distance myself from you. My heart stopped. What did you say? I asked, dreading the answer. He looked at me, his eyes fierce. I told him no. You're not just my assistant, Lucas. You're my reason. Tears stung my eyes as I pulled him into a hug, the world fading around us. But the victory was short-lived. The next day, a board member leaked our relationship to a major news outlet, and the story exploded. Social media was a battlefield. Some praised Ethan's courage. Others called for his resignation. My inbox filled with hate mail, accusing me of seducing him for power. I wanted to run, to hide, but Ethan stood firm. We're not hiding anymore, he said, his hand in mine. The fallout was brutal. The media storm painted Ethan as a reckless CEO, me as a gold digger, and our love as a scandal. Caldwell Enterprises' stock plummeted, and the board doubled down, scheduling a vote to oust Ethan. I felt like I was drowning, my guilt a weight I couldn't shake. This is my fault, I told him one night, my voice breaking. He cupped my face, his eyes fierce. No, Lucas, this is our truth. We fought back the only way we knew how, together. Ethan hired a PR firm to counter the narrative, emphasizing his leadership and the shelter project's impact. I poured my heart into the shelter, organizing a fundraiser that drew hundreds, including some of Ethan's biggest critics. The teens rallied around us, their support a reminder of what we were fighting for. Jamie handed me a drawing of two figures holding hands under a rainbow, with the words "Love Wins" scrawled across it. I cried, and Ethan pulled me close, his strength anchoring me. The night before the board vote, we escaped to the cliffs of Big Sur, the same place where our love had taken root. The sunset painted the sky in hues of fire, and we stood hand in hand, the wind carrying our fears away. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Ethan said, his voice steady, "I choose you." I kissed him, pouring every ounce of my heart into it, knowing this moment might be all we had. The board meeting was a battlefield. Ethan stood tall, his voice unwavering as he defended his leadership and us. "I've spent my life hiding who I am," he said, his eyes finding mine in the back of the room. "But Lucas showed me what it means to be free. I won't apologize for that." The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. When a vote came, it was close, but he kept his position, barely. The aftermath wasn't easy. Some investors pulled out, and the media's scrutiny lingered, but Ethan was unshaken. He came out publicly, holding my hand at a press conference, his voice steady as he declared, "I'm gay, and I'm in love with Lucas Bennett." The world gasped, but I only saw him, my cold CO, now a man who'd chosen love over fear. We rebuilt step by step. The shelter thrived, becoming a beacon for queer youth, and Ethan's leadership grew stronger, grounded in authenticity. I left my assistant role, taking a position at the shelter where I could make a difference. Our love deepened, no longer a secret but a light we carried proudly. 1 year later, we returned to Big Sur, the cliffs as breathtaking as ever. Ethan knelt before me, a ring glinting in the sunset. "Lucas," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you're my heart's whisper. Marry me." Tears streamed down my face as I said yes, the waves crashing below like applause. Our story wasn't just about love. It was about courage, about choosing truth over safety, about building a world where no one has to hide. As we stood together, the horizon stretching endlessly before us, I knew we'd face whatever came next, hand in hand, hearts open.